Hi there, it's Bonnie with So Inspired by Bonnie with another Tuesday's tip. And today is more than just a tip. We're kind of doing a lesson on how to do T-shirt quilts. Since this is more than just a simple tip, this is going to have to span over 2 to 3 segments of tips because there's just quite a bit to cover, and I really don't want to leave anything out of the tips that I know to make the whole process easier for you, and I want to give you several different options. So I'm going to go over to the computer, and if you're here, go ahead and give me a shout out. Be sure to follow our page. Be sure to give me a like or let me know you're here in some fashion, because the only way I know you're here is to see your comments and likes or love or what have you. And if you know of anybody, you have any sewing buddies that you think might benefit or want some help with creating T-shirt quilts, by all means go ahead and share the video. The more the merrier. I also wanted to add, be sure to sign up for our newsletter, which is at www.soinspiredbybonnie.com. We send out reminder notices when we're doing the Tuesdays tips, just in case there's any schedule changes. And we also send out notifications of new releases and sale information. So you'll definitely want to sign up for that. And we also send out a couple of free designs when you do sign up. So just to let you know, and I do see that some folks are signing in. Excuse me, I have a little frog in my throat, it seems like. Let me get a little drink here. Now originally, I have to confess, originally I was thinking, I don't know how I'm going to do a T-shirt quilt segment because there's just so much to cover, but so many of you wrote in and let me know that you really do want to see some information on T-shirt quilts that I thought I need to cover it. And when I worked for a dealer, it was a very popular topic. A lot of people wanted to create T-shirt quilts. And they're really popular with the people receiving them because you're creating something that is their hobby, something they enjoy, because a lot of times you buy T-shirt quilts that reflect your hobbies or your interests. So it's really quite a nice little memory quilt to give them. These are not heirloom quilts. You don't have to stress over them too much. But for some reason, I know a lot of us are afraid of T-shirt quilts. And I have another confession. You know me, I lay it out all out there. But I was afraid of doing a T-shirt quilt for the very first one. And each T-shirt quilt I've done presents its own set of challenges. No two T-shirt quilts are the same. At least what I have done, they've never been the same. So I think the fear with T-shirt quilts is that there's no patterns. We don't know how they're going to turn out exactly. And we're kind of used to following a pattern, following a set of rules, and doing little segments. So that can be a little bit intimidating when there's no guidelines, no rules, no pattern. It's a little intimidating. But the nice side of that is you have complete artistic license. So you can look at it and you can do whatever you want. It's going to work. It really is going to work, whatever you do. So if you cut something too small, we have a way to fix that. Short of if you actually cut into the design itself. But if it's a little small, we have a way to fix that. If it's too big, you can always cut it down. There's several different ways to do T-shirt quilts, as I mentioned. You can add sashing. This one I did behind me has sashing added. You can do them without sashing. You can do them where they look like there's a shadow box added. Gives you that shadow 3D effect where the T-shirt's just popping off of the page. I've seen T-shirt quilts done with as few as 4 T-shirts on up to 20 or 30 even. Probably not 30, that's probably more like 2 T-shirts, but you get my gist. And that can be intimidating too because we're used to knowing exactly what supplies we need to go purchase and how much we need of everything, and just no rules. So how do we approach this? Well, the first thing you want to do is get your t-shirts. Make sure that the t-shirts are clean and have been washed, and then you want to stack them up and you want to take a look at them and kind of get an idea, see if they kind of talk to you and tell you what they want you to do with them. I know that sounds crazy, but it's really true. Also, about that quilt that I saw that only had 4 t-shirts, you might be thinking, how on earth can you make a quilt with only 4 t-shirts? What they did, I saw it on Nancy Zeman. She did a segment on creating t-shirt quilts, and she had one hanging behind her, only 4 t-shirts. What they did was they filled in, to make the quilt bigger, they filled in the other blocks with traditional quilt blocks. So you can mix and match media, you can mix and match fabrics. The sky's the limit is what I'm trying to convey here. It's just amazing what you can do. And what I've learned from my t-shirt quilt making is I've applied it to other things. And that's why I've called this segment Creating T-Shirts and Beyond, because I've used cheerleading uniforms was my last t-shirt quilt. Okay, what I was saying is the scary thing about cheerleading uniforms is that I know how expensive those are, so that was a little bit intimidating to cut into a cheerleading uniform. Also, they're pretty stiff, so I was a little worried how that might work. It worked great. So you can make them out of baby clothes, you can make them out of even traditional fabrics. I know that sounds crazy, but the techniques that I learned in using t-shirt quilt, the methods rather for t-shirt quilts, I went and applied over to a regular quilt. I had a bunch of embroideries. They were daisy designs in different shapes, sizes, and I had some fabrics that I really liked, and I applied what I learned making t-shirts. I didn't know what I was going to come up with in the end, and I just started creating. So you can use these techniques that I'm going to show you on just about anything. So as I said, where do you start? Okay, so you get your t-shirts together, make sure they're clean as I mentioned, and then we're going to look at them. We're just going to take them and look at them individually. Now, my youngest daughter, Kristen, this t-shirt, just a little history, is a replacement for the very first t-shirt quilt I ever made. And it was a Delta Gamma t-shirt because she was in that sorority as in college. And so all her t-shirts were pink or blue, which was kind of nice for my first t-shirt quilt because there was some sort of theme already. I had 2 colors to deal with. Well, that quilt unfortunately got lost and is no more. It was lost in a flood, and so we're creating a replacement t-shirt quilt for the one that got lost. Well, the t-shirts that she has left are not pink and blue. They're every kind of color under the sun. And I'm looking at this going, I don't know, I would never put, burnt orange with purple, but that's the t-shirts I have to work with, and it's going to work. So you can mix and match t-shirts. Again, there's no rule. So this is going to work. Okay, we got them all clean, and I'm going to look at them and see. Now, I like to break down my t-shirts into blocks so that I'm not dealing with the whole quilt all at once. I like to break it down into smaller segments and think in terms of a block at a time. How's this block going to look? How's that block going to look? So on and so forth. So that it's not a huge thing to take on. Kind of like that saying about eating an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Well, that's kind of what you're going to do with the t-shirt quilt. You're going to take it one block at a time and see what you can do with this. And you want to look at the t-shirts to see what is your biggest design, because if you want all the blocks to be exactly the same size, it needs to fit within that, the design needs to fit within that block size. So that's kind of the first thing I do is I find out what I have to work with, because I can't go out and just buy new t-shirts. I have to work with what has been given me. And this first one, and sometimes a t-shirt will talk to me and say, I want to be the center of attention. And this one right here is one of those that kind of acts that way to me. He looks kind of like a a cute little theme there because he's, you know, the UT logo and all that. And I want to see if he'll fit within the favorite size I like here is the 12.5-inch square ruler, and he fits really nice inside that. So that's a possibility. I kind of like that idea, just starting off. Now, again, with T-shirt quilts, these ideas can change as you go along, believe me. Your original thought might not be what you wind up in the end. You might have a different idea as you go along. Now, this is totally different color. And yes, this will definitely fit within the 12.5-inch square, but one thing that I've noticed right off the bat here is if I try to center this, and I'm going to try to hold this up where you can see it. If I try to center, can you see? If I try to center this design over the 12.5-inch square, I'm starting to cut into the top of the neckline. And there's two ways to approach that. I've seen T-shirt quilts where they use the neckline. I had to on a few of those cheerleading uniforms because they had such a deep V on them that I had to use some of that. And what you do is you put another piece of fabric behind it. That's why we always save all our pieces to the T-shirts until we're completed with our quilt. So I could do that. I could, you know, save a section from another, you know, the back of this T-shirt or what have you, and piece it and stitch it behind there, and we'll cover that kind of stuff later. Or I can use another segment, say the back of this T-shirt, and I can actually just add a new strip to the top and get that nice and centered if I want it centered. A third option, and I've seen this done too, is where you don't worry about it being centered. You just line your ruler up just beneath that neckline and don't worry about this logo being centered in your quilt block. So you've got three different options there. You can either include the neckline, have the logo not centered, have it, you know, a little bit higher up, and I think I did one that wasn't centered on this quilt, but I kind of like the centered idea. Or you can add another strip from leftover fabric on another section of the quilt. So just so you know, you're going to run into the neckline. That's no big deal, it happens. This one's going to have the same problem. It's even more exaggerated on the front. It's definitely going to run into the neckline if I try to square up, or excuse me, center that logo with my block. So I'm going to run into that with a few of these quilts, or few of these T-shirts, excuse me. Now here's the back side, and you're going to possibly run into this as well on T-shirts. This one is definitely not going to fit within the 12.5-inch square ruler that I kind of like to use. And the reason, let me go back, the reason I sort of like to use the 12.5-inch ruler is because it's divisible by 2 really easily. It's divisible by 3 really easily. So I kind of like that. I also have a square ruler that's 14 inches. It's a little bit harder for me to divide by 2 and well, not 2, but by 3. It's a little trickier to divide by 3, and I like to add segments of 3 as opposed to 2. It's just my personal preference. Again, you have complete license. Now this one will definitely fit within a 14-inch square ruler, so that's a possibility. Or another option for this one is if I still have my heart set on doing a 12.5-inch block, what I can do with this one, since it's longer than 12.5 inches, is I could make this into 2 12.5-inch blocks as far as total length goes. So since this is long, the 12.5-inch fits widthwise, but what it'll do is take up a double space for my 12.5-inch block. So that's an option with that one as well, and I'm just kind of thinking this through. Now, you'll see this a lot of times on T-shirts where you have this cute little written logo of what the club was, and this one says Texas Cowgirls and the year. So there's right on there a pretty cool little logo that I want to use. I definitely want to keep that. And here's another one that could possibly be a center block for me. I really like this little cowgirl. She's really sweet. But again, she's a little bit too long. Okay, so this one again would have to either take up a double of 12.5-inch squares or maybe a little extra, or I would have to go with the 14-inch square if I wanted everything, you know, square. And again, I can, on the long square ones, you know, this one was kind of a long one, and to make it a little bit wider, I added some of the front logos to the side. So again, I was working one block at a time on this to create and get things in a specific size. All right, here's another one. It's got a really cute little front logo on it, but this one's got a new challenge for me because it's going to be too wide. So let me get my ruler here. Excuse me. Why I'm having everything drop today. This one, it barely fits in the 12.5-inch. I mean, we're going edge to edge, so if I were to sew my seam allowances, I'm going to cut into the design. So this one's going to be a 14-inch. Okay, so this one is wider, so we'll have to either go with a 14-inch square again on this one, or we can go with the 12.5-inch but make it 2 blocks wide. So this is why it's always a good idea to kind of look over your t-shirts, see what you have to work with, and kind of get a game plan of what you might want to do with them. Okay, what do we have here? This one is a wider one, but it's going to fit within my preferred 12.5-inch. Now it's going to come into the neckline again by the time I center it, so I'll probably want to add some fabric that's left over from other sections of the t-shirt to the top to make it centered. And don't worry about adding in extra fabric to the top. That little seam, you know, if you're matching the fabric from the t-shirts, and I like when I cut them to keep my t-shirt front and back together just for this purpose, because some whites are different and some navy blues are definitely different, and that way you have the right match if you want it to almost disappear and just look like a centered navy blue, for example. Okay, here's my last example of a t-shirt, because I didn't pull out all 15 or 16, whatever she gave me, but I did want to go over some different options here. This one, again, has another cute little logo at the front, and you can put these in your quilt sideways. You can put them, you know, running up and down, or again, you have complete artistic license with these. The back, I think, is going to fit just fine in my 12.5-inch ruler. So I think that's going to work really well if I decide to go ahead with the 12.5-inch. But look at these sleeves. They've got these cute little stripes on them, and I really like that. And that could be cute as an addition to some of my smaller sections maybe. So save all that stuff that might have some unusual treatments to them, because you might want to use them in another section of your quilt. So what I would do with this, now this is a sleeve, and you remember I mentioned some of the sections that you should never use in your t-shirt quilt. Well, here's what I'm talking about. You don't want to use the armpits. And the reason probably is pretty obvious why you would not want to use the armpits, is because they get aromatic, shall we say? As soon as it's hit with a hot iron, you'll get these aromas sometimes out of t-shirts that you really don't want. Sometimes they actually can get stiff too, and kind of worn out, so you don't want to use them. So what I would do in this instance when I'm getting these ready and I would probably cut across, you know, I'd cut off the sleeve, and then I would probably cut up about 1 to 2 inches from the bottom so that I got rid of that armpit. You don't want to use the armpits in your quilt, but you still have plenty. Once this is opened up, you still have quite a bit of fabric there that you can use. So save those sleeves if you have some interesting treatments on the sleeves, because that can add some really cool interest to your quilt. So once you've kind of looked over your t-shirts and kind of thinking it through what size blocks you might want to use for your t-shirts, then you can start preparing your t-shirts. You don't have to make a cut and dry decision just yet. You can start mulling it around in your head and thinking, okay, do I want to go with the 12.5 and make a couple of them double wide and a couple of them twice as long, or do I want to stick with a 14-inch square and maybe do a shadow box effect, or maybe add sashing? Start just sort of thinking that through now that you've gone through your t-shirts. Then what you're going to do is you're going to, let me grab a t-shirt as an example. This one will work good. I'm going to put these on the ground so they're out of the way. Then what you're going to do is you're going to actually start cutting into your t-shirts. And probably cutting into the first t-shirt is maybe another scary moment, but it's not bad. So what you're going to do is, let me move this one out of the way. So we've got this t-shirt. And you can do this with a rotary cutter, or you can do it with regular scissors. It doesn't matter. I've done this sometimes with regular scissors while I was watching a TV show that I wanted to see. So I kind of got two things done at once. Now this one's kind of easy because it's only got a design on the front. There's nothing on the back. So it's pretty easy to take care of. You're just going to start with cutting off the sleeves. And you do not have to be super duper careful. You just want to cut off that seam. And if things aren't straight, don't worry about it. Again, I save everything until I am done with my quilt. And then, and only then, when my quilt top is completely done, do I possibly use some of these leftover scraps as rags. But until that time, they're a possibility for my quilt, so I don't get rid of them. Okay, so I've cut off the sleeves on this. Again, you could use your rotary cutter. That's just, you know, whatever way you want to do it. Now, a neat trick on this, not there yet. I thought I was, but I'm not. And then what you want to do is cut your shoulder seam, and you're just opening that shoulder seam up. So you're going to cut along that shoulder seam on both sides. Again, you could take your rotary cutter and speed up the process a little bit if you wanted to. And I kind of hacked that, not a problem. See, I'm not super duper straight, that's not a problem. And then you've got kind of this tube thing going on. And you're going to open up your t-shirt and you're going to fold it in half the other direction where you've got, and I hope you can see this, basically you've got the shoulders up here, you've got the armpit together, and you've got the two sections folded in half. Okay, so you've got your t-shirt folded in half the opposite direction. I'm going to smooth this out a little bit, and again you're just matching. This is my front half folded in half, and this is the back half folded in half, and it's the armpit meeting in the middle. And then, you know, ordinarily I would take my ruler and rotary cutter and just cut down the middle here. And that way you're cutting both sides, both sides of your t-shirt at the same time. It saves you one complete cut, if that makes sense. Otherwise, you'd keep your t-shirt flat and you'd cut one side and then cut the other side, or open it up. Either way works, but this just saves you one cut, so it goes a little faster. And here's your front. Okay, we've got just this section ready, and here's the back. And I am definitely going to save this back because I might need this fabric for something else. Now, I'm not going to put a defusible on the back just yet because I might not need it, so I don't want to waste the fusible if I don't have to. But I will keep these and my sleeves together until I have my blocks sort of figured out what I'm doing. And then the next step I want to do, once I've got my front cut and ready, again, I'm going to keep my sections together. And here's another t-shirt I just quickly cut up before we started today. Here's the front, which just has this little tiny logo, which I will fuse. And the fusible that I use, that's a good one. This is interfacing that I got at Joann's. I believe you can get it online if you do a Google search. And it's by Pellon. And it's P as in Paul, or P as in Pellon, Pellon, or P, 44F. And let me put this up on the screen so that you can see it. There it is. P44F. Now, when I bought this about a year or so ago, it was 99 cents a yard. I think it's been that price for a very long time, so it's very inexpensive. I buy it by the bolt so that I don't have to worry that I have enough. If there's 20 or 30 yards on a bolt, that's 20 or 30 bucks if you're paying full price, but wait until you have a coupon, you know, a 50% off coupon. I've seen 60% off coupons, and then you can get the whole bolt for quite a steal. So, when you fuse, you want to iron. Now that you've got your t-shirt kind of flat, it's easier to iron it. One tidbit that's very important: do not touch the logos or anything that's been silk screened onto the t-shirt. Do not touch it with a hot iron because it will melt. So you want to use some sort of a pressing cloth if you're ironing the top of your t-shirt. I ironed the back of it. It was easy to get to. I didn't worry about the sleeves just yet because I'm not fusing those. I don't know if I'll need them. And again, I haven't done the front yet. But what we did on the back is I just took a section right off of the bolt and I cut it the full length of my bolt, and I kind of centered it over the back of my t-shirt. And there's a bumpy side and a smooth side to the interfacing. You put the bumpy side next to the wrong side of the t-shirt. Use a lot of steam and press it for about 10 seconds in each section if you're using an iron. And then I kind of, once I've got it steamed in place, then I'll kind of iron over the whole thing just to make sure I didn't miss any little spots. If you have a steam press, I highly recommend getting out that steam press, using steam with it, because you can just do it in two sections. Again, use a press cloth so that you don't get any residue from the interfacing if it happens to run over. But you want to stabilize your t-shirts because they're stretchy, and you don't want to just sew them without some sort of stabilization so that they're non-stretch and much easier to handle. I find that the Pellon interfacing that I recommended is very fine. It doesn't change the hand of your t-shirts. It's really pliable, and like I said, works great, and it's inexpensive. So I just put it over the full length. Then I cut out my squares, which we are going to cover next week, but then I start cutting out my squares to the size that I want for my t-shirts. Not until then. If for some reason I needed this bottom section added to a section that was too short, I can overlap this fusible. Let me get my scissors here, and I'm just going to hack off a little piece just to give you a demo, to show you what I mean. Well, that tore. I was trying to cut it off and it kind of tore on me. Let me see if I can get a little bit bigger piece here. I know this isn't really straight or pretty, but I want you to have the idea of what I'm talking about. I can overlap my interfacing and fuse it if I need to fill in a section. Don't worry about that. It's not going to make any difference whatsoever. So if you accidentally cut your interfacing too short, cut yourself another little section, overlap it until you have the length that you need. And then we're going to next week kind of start tackling getting things cut and laying them and piecing them and figuring out how we're going to sew everything together. So I hope this has given you a couple of ideas. Save all the backs, save all the bottoms, save the sleeves just in case there's some neat detail on that, or you might need the fabric, you just never know. A lot of the t-shirts that she gave me, there's stuff on the front and on the back. A lot of the t-shirts that were in my husband's quilt, he only had it on the front, so I didn't have as much to do. If you're short, I'll add this too. If you are short a block, remember I said you can add a regular quilt block with regular fabric. You can also, and here's something I did, and I saved the back of one of the t-shirts. I digitized and embroidered out this, oh, I'm off the camera. Let me move this over so you can see it better. Okay, let me just pull this off. I took one of the backs, and it was plain, and I digitized a little poem. It's the high flight poem, which most pilots know about. And so that kind of pertained to his quilt and fit in his theme. I needed one other block, so I saved a backing, and then I just did some embroidery on it. You can do that with just embroidery designs as well. Here's, an eagle that I put on just a plain back t-shirt. There wasn't anything on it to begin with, but I added some embroidery. So you can do just about anything to fill in a gap if you're missing a spot and you need a little space. That's why I should say it's a very good idea to save all the backs, to save all the little sleeves until you have the full layout of your t-shirt quilt figured out. So right now, this week, we were just getting the t-shirts prepared. We're just getting the interfacing to the back. We're getting them all cut up in the loosest form. And then we can kind of start laying them out and seeing what size block we want to do, and start thinking, do we want to add sashing? Do we want to do it without sashing? And we'll go from there. I hope that you have found some tips in there that you might be able to use. I'm going to push this over here, and I'm going to check on the computer to see if we have any questions that I can answer right now, and then I will also double check and make sure as we go along later on if there's any new questions that arise. So, oh, Sandy said that my husband's quilt is beautiful. Thank you, Sandy. That was my second t-shirt quilt. So I had a lot of fun. There are no rules. You just go in and start creating, and the t-shirts really do kind of lead you in a specific direction, because a lot of times, as I said before, there's a common theme, whether they went to college, whether it's a Harley Davidson quilt. This one happened to be Air Force. You'll see it when somebody brings you their t-shirts. So it's a lot of fun. It really is. Anna said, thanks. It's been a lot of help. I'm glad you found it helpful. We'll dive in more to actually creating those blocks next week. Terrell said, great tips as usual. Thank you, Terrell. That was very sweet of you. Joanne says, happy 4th of July. Yes, happy 4th of July. I hope everybody has some neat ideas for seeing the fireworks. Thank you for Florida. I have been thinking of doing this for years. Well, I hope that we have taken some of the fear out of there, and that you will try it, because once you've tried one, you'll get hooked. You really will, because it's very liberating to create something where you don't know what it's going to look like until it's done. You don't know the direction it's going to go until you get into it, but it's a lot of fun. I think you'll enjoy it. Yvonne said, do I mix cottons and knits or just use similar material throughout the top? I mix cottons and knits. With t-shirt quilts, there's no rules. And in my husband's quilt, I have sashing that's all out of a Moda marble cotton fabric. The backing is, a real patriotic themed fabric. Some of my borders, I use the same patriotic themed fabric. So yes, I mix cottons and the t-shirts together and they do great. I haven't had any issues with them. That being the case, you might want to, and I did not mention that, but this is a good point. I would recommend, I shouldn't say you might, I would recommend that you pre-wash your cotton fabrics, or I like to a lot of times use flannel backings on these quilts because they're nice and cuddly. It's a nice cuddly fabric backing to go with your t-shirts that are well worn a lot of times and very soft and cuddly already. The t-shirts have already been shrunk because they've been worn, they've been washed a lot of times. The cotton fabrics have not. So I would pre-wash the cotton fabrics so that they don't shrink, just like your t-shirts aren't going to shrink. You want things to kind of match. Other than that, yeah, I do mix them up. So, a very good question. Thank you. Mary says, I've made several t-shirt quilts, have done several without sashing. Great, it's a great way to use all sorts of sizes of designs from shirts. Mary, I agree. When you have a lot of things that are going different sizes and you want to blend them together, I still kind of, when I was talking about using a 12.5-inch square, maybe I have to do a double wide or maybe I have to do a double long 12.5-inch. In that scenario, I would probably not use any sashing because they're going to be odd shapes and I'm going to have little things to kind of fill in. But I'm still thinking in that 12.5-inch block frame of mind, whether it's a double block over here or a double wide over there, and then maybe filling in gapping spaces with some little 4.5-inch blocks from the front logos. It doesn't look like that once it's done because everything fits together, but when you put little blocks together with a bigger block, it kind of breaks up things and it's just a really neat effect. Again, the sky's the limit. You can do whatever and it just works. It really does. Let's see. Sandy says, I always wash beforehand. Also serge cut in, so don't get lots of shredding. I don't get any shredding on my t-shirt quilts at all. So I've not had any problems having to serge anything. The first t-shirt quilt I did, I serged all the seams, and my quilter said, please don't do that because it adds extra bulk to the seams and it made it a little difficult for her to handle. So I wouldn't recommend serging seams, not that you recommended that either, but I haven't noticed a problem with my t-shirt shredding or raveling. So I've never serged. But if you do have that issue, definitely would be a good idea. Ginger says, if using kids' t-shirts, I assume the same principles apply, just use smaller ruler sections. Absolutely. The one t-shirt I pulled out, let me get down here. This was, now she was, my youngest daughter's pretty small, and when she was in college, she was very small. So her t-shirts aren't very big. This one still would work, but yes, if you're using baby clothes or if you're using small children toddler t-shirts, you're going to want to adjust the quilt size accordingly. That's why I was saying take a look at your t-shirts, see what section, which design is the biggest that you're dealing with, and then you can kind of work down from there. So it gives you an idea of what you're having to work with. And if you're working with baby clothes or toddler clothes, of course you're going to have smaller sections to deal with, but the principles are still going to apply. You're still going to definitely need to stabilize the backing with an interfacing so that it's not all stretchy and going everywhere, and you want to use an interfacing that's very thin and pliable, doesn't really change the hand of your fabric, and is fusible. Let's see. Let's see, Sharon says, what type of stabilizer do you use on the embroidery? If generally speaking, if I've used this interfacing, that's kind of an extra little stabilizer, so that works really well. Or if I needed a little bit extra, which probably I would on some of those because they were pretty dense designs, I'd use a medium weight tear away and then just tear it away when I was done with the embroidery. Another option would be to use a fusible mesh stabilizer, and then that could just stay in with the quilt. So you have a couple of options available. If it was stretchy, like on my husband's quilt, because I did use the T-shirt, I probably had, and I can't open it up, and it's been a few years since I did this, but I treated the backing, I'm sure, on the T-shirt first to stabilize it, and then I probably have a poly mesh cutaway behind the embroidery, especially on those eagles that were, you know, really dense. And you know, this T-shirt quilt had to be stabilized first, or T-shirt square had to be stabilized first. So you have a couple of options, not just one will work. So that's nice that we have a couple of options that will work. So maybe you have one of those options available already on hand and don't have to go out and buy new stuff. Let's see. Do I use anything on the top? No, you could, but I didn't. I know some people really like to use I'm refreshing the page because some of the comments aren't showing up. I know some of the people like to use a wash away, you know, the plastic looking type. It's not plastic, but it looks like the plastic, the wash away Solvay, or a water soluble. That's the clear plastic looking type stabilizer. So that you could use as a topper, but I didn't, and it did fine. Do I have any issue with poly mesh shrinking? I did a video, it's been a few months back, on how to pre-shrink the poly mesh, because yes, if you hit it with a really hot iron, it can shrink. So what I like to do as a quick recap is I'll use my Teflon sheet, put the poly mesh on top, and I will hit it with the same temperature that I intend on ironing my embroideries with, or the T-shirts with. So if you're using like a cotton setting, I would use the cotton setting on the poly mesh, but on a Teflon sheet so that it doesn't stick to anything. And then I would go ahead and fuse it to whatever at that point. In fact, there's a lot of poly mesh that doesn't even have, it's not fusible. So you could still, I would use probably a Teflon sheet underneath my ironing surface and kind of shrink it, or pre-shrink it, I should say. Excuse me. And Diane said, I need a replay. Can't wait to try. Good. Well, the replay will be on later with all its topsy-turvy falls on my camera that decided to misbehave today, but it'll be there. I think I've covered all the questions. Oh, Joanne said, I know this is not related, but where can I purchase the eagle design that is on the husband's quilt? She loves it. That was an Anita Good design. That wasn't something I digitized. It was done several years ago, so it's probably one of his older sets, but he did a beautiful job on it. So that's one of Steve Wilson's Anita Good designs. So even we digitizers use other digitizers stuff once in a while. But that was before I had my website. I'll throw out that disclaimer. Let's see, what else do we have? I think that's it, so I will go back and double check and make sure we don't have any other questions that I didn't get answered. If you think of a question after we go offline, don't hesitate to let me know, and I will answer the question as soon as I'm able. Sharon said that she always enjoys my sharing my knowledge. Thank you, Sharon. I enjoy sharing my tips and tidbits that I've learned through the years. Oh, Diane said, I was late in viewing, not your fault. Also, I saw a new Buddies, can't wait to purchase. Ah, I did put up the Dragonfly Buddies, a little Dragonfly Buddies today. So I think I've covered all the questions. Again, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy 4th of July weekend to spend a little time with me and go over our T-shirt quilts and to kind of get started. Again, we're going to take these in little segments so that it's not so scary, and I think you're just going to have a blast. Once you dive in and start doing it, you'll want to do more. So next week we'll get a little bit more into the blocks and the planning of the quilt itself and proper techniques to actually sewing them together, seam allowances and whatnot, how to handle things. So I think that covers it. And until next week, I hope you have a great 4th of July. I hope you have a great sewing week. And until then, bye-bye.